All right, let's start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rachakodash. All right, welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is Art Thou Also Become Weak as We? And that's taken directly from Isaiah the 14th chapter. And it's based off of this video I was watching a little while ago. The name of the channel is War and Wealth. I wish I would have pulled it up. Just bear with me 1 second. This Moabite looking dude that I've been watching as of late, and pretty much, you know, this is him right here, and it says Iran's $1 million missile splits into hundreds of warheads, and America has no way to stop it. And pretty much, as Spirit's been having me say, that America's military strategy is antiquated. They got the strongest military, the most expensive military. They have the high-tech weapons, you know, on the planet, but still in all, they have an antiquated way of going about these military strategies. Iran, on the other hand, is pretty much working on a water strategy, meaning that, you know, like Bruce Lee said, water could flow or it could crash. You know, it's unpredictable. You don't know what it's going to do. You know, and this is pretty much the strategy that Iran is using on America and Israel. And pretty much, you know, it's a guerrilla war technique. You know, and it's frustrating the American military and also the Israeli military because they can't figure out how to combat against it. You know, so what I typed in was the meaning of unpredictable strategy. An unpredictable strategy is a competitive approach designed to keep opponents or competitors guessing by avoiding predictable patterns, behaviors, or decisions, because warfare, you know, in most cases is pretty much the same thing done over and over again. You know, and this is why the most successful military you know, commanders of their time studied war patterns, war strategies. You know, they would go back to, you know, wars that were won by certain particular empires and study those wars to find out, you know, how to use those same strategies, you know, to win the wars that they were currently engaged in. And that's why you had certain, you know, commanders, generals, so on and so forth, that were highly demanded because of their, you know, military prowess and military strategy and the ability to get the job done, because they, you know, were able to take all these different strategies and put them together, combine them together into one, as well as the military and as well as the trained military men that they had to win particular wars. You know, whether it was direct warfare, or whether it was, you know, guerrilla tactics, or whatever it was, you know, whether it was a different weaponry they used, bulwarks, you know, catapults, you know, crossbows, you know, bow and arrow, whatever the case was, to win the battle, they were able to strategize and outfox the enemy. And that's pretty much what the Iranian military is doing to America and Israel. But before I go to this, I want to continue reading. It says, it leverages surprise, rapid adaptation, and sometimes calculated, erratic, or novel actions to disrupt an opponent's planning. And pretty much, you will call this like an unorthodox boxer. You have an orthodox boxer, which has a pretty much a straightforward, you know, strategy to fight. But then you have the unorthodox boxer, which is off key. You know, he's off rhythm. He's not, you know, coming to you, you know, in a orthodox type way. And this is pretty much the war that Iran is fighting. against America, constantly having them guessing, and they keep switching up their weaponry too. Sometimes they might release some good shit. Sometimes they release bullshit. Just to keep these devils guessing, and they have a lot of weapons in the deserts, in different sand places where the weapon will shoot and you don't know where the weapon is coming from. So it's pretty much frustrating the American/Israeli military. It says gain a competitive advantage and create uncertainty, often used in military, sports, and business contexts. And that's pretty much what it is. They're gaining a competitive advantage and creating uncertainty, which is creating what? Frustration. So now I typed in outfox meaning. Outfox means defeat or deceive someone by being more clever or cunning than they are. Outwit. Like you have Sun Tzu, the art of war. Pretty much, let's just see what is Sun Tzu, the art. Okay, Tzu. Sun Tzu, the art of war, is an ancient Chinese military treatise focused on winning conflicts through strategy, intelligence, and deception rather than raw force. See, America is relying on raw force. That hegemonic spirit, they still think that they have it because after World War II, when they dropped those bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they thought that was the end-all, be-all. But that was just the beginning. That was just the beginning of their end, pretty much. Because after that, nations really started to invest their resources and their money and their time into building better offensives, better weapons to be able to combat against this, American hammering. See, America's used to hammering. They're used to the world being nails and they just being the hammer. But, the hammer doesn't work if you can't find the nail. In order for you to nail something, you have to hit the nail. But if you can't hit the nail, you're pretty much playing whack-a-mole with your enemy. Right? So I'm going to read that again. Sun Tzu, the art of war, is an ancient Chinese military treatise focused on winning conflicts through strategy, intelligence, and deception rather than raw force. Said it teaches that the highest form of victory is subduing the enemy without fighting. Key principles include knowing yourself and the enemy, adaptability, speed, and exploiting weakness. And I was watching this video at the camp house before we went out to camp on Friday, and pretty much it was something along the lines of master yourself. Miyamoto, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. And pretty much, I believe it was Masashi Miyamoto or something like that. I believe that was his name, if I'm not mistaken. And pretty much, he wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the most skillful. He wasn't the most, intelligent. He wasn't the most, the best candidate you would pick for a war. But he never lost any battles because he learned to master himself first. People lose strategies or battles because they doubt themselves, and that's pretty much the problem. So America, they're not looking, to fight this war really more so on strategies. They're pretty much looking for weaknesses in the Iranian, armor. But the thing is that their strategies are so unpredictable that it has America off balance, and they don't know how to adapt. And that was the situation with, I believe it was Masashi Miyamoto, if I'm not mistaken, that he learned how to take his weaknesses and turn them into strengths, So I'm going to start off here. And you can I just subscribe to this guy. I watch him. He also does a couple of other different channels. And one of the channels he does, I believe it's called The Boring Economist or something like that. I believe it's the same dude. It sounds the same. And he has, I think, 2 other channels which I subscribe to. You know, he does very good videos, very comprehensive, easy to follow along, understand. So Isaiah 14. Oh, and this one, like, by the way, is called War and Wealth. Isaiah 14:3. And it shall come to pass in the day that the Lord Yahweh B'Shem Yahshua shall give thee rest from thy sorrow and from thy fear and from the hard bondage wherein thou was made to serve. So when the Lord is about to deliver us from captivity, there will be signs that would follow. You know, one of the signs is, you know, knowledge will increase, wars, rumors of wars, so on and so forth. You know, but also, you know, the power, you know, the hegemonic power of America, Babylon the Great, you know, waning, you know, being less effective on the world. And like these different talking heads are speaking about, is that while America is fighting this war in frustration, China, Russia, and other nations are watching closely to see and they're actually seeing the chinks in the armor. It's like you have an undefeated boxer that goes fight, you know, and they're fighting this championship fight, and they barely win that particular fight, you know, because they pretty much use the same strategy. And the particular fight that they just fought, you know, they barely won the fight, and there were chinks in the armor. There were, you know, weaknesses that were exposed in that fight, and other boxers that would be up next to fight would exploit those weaknesses. And that's pretty much what we see going on right now in the American empire. You know, Russia, China, North Korea, I believe it's North Korea if I'm not mistaken, and others are watching closely and taking notes, you know. And remember, their technology and their weaponry is increasing by the day. You know, they have people working around the clock, you know, on these, you know, on intelligence, and also in new and creative ways of the future. America is just stuck in that antiquated military strategy. So I wanted to see what it says in the NLT. And that wonderful day when Yahweh B'Shem Yahshua gives his people rest from sorrow and fear, from slavery and chains, see? So when we're about to be delivered, this is what's going to be taking place. The fourth verse says that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how have the oppressors ceased? The golden city ceased. So that means that their power would be waning. Their power would be diminishing. You know why? Because the Lord is taking that power away, because the power that the Lord gave them at one time was for them to secure, you know, that top position on the planet, because it was their time to rule. Just like, you know, when Alexander the Greek was, you know, on the scene. I'm not sure if that's in Daniel 8 or 1 Maccabees 1. It said that his feet didn't touch the ground. And why is that? Let me see. Right here, Daniel 8 and 5. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat, which the he-goat represents Alexander the Creep, the Greek, they call him the Great, came from the west on the face of the whole earth, right? Because he came from Macedonia in that region of, you know, in Greece, in that area. So he came towards the west because the Persian Empire was in the west. In the east. He came from the west to the east. All right, that's why I said he came from the west, right? It says the he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth. Why? Because at that time he would rule over the known world and touched not the ground, meaning that there was nothing that could stop him. He was an unstoppable force. He was pretty much the juggernaut of his time. And you have to remember that within the matter of 12 years, from the age of 20 to the age of 32, he conquered the known world at the time. You know, you have the Persian Empire, right? Check the Persian Empire, which was the prominent empire at that time. Persian Empire map. Look at how vast a region the Persian, you know, controlled. you know, and this is where Alexander came from, up here in Macedonia, right? This is their empire. Look at how vast it was, and with this vast empire and their military strategy, and their mercenaries that they hired, because they would hire a lot of different mercenaries, they were not able to stop Alexander the Creep or the Greek from taking over all this. That's why it says his feet touched not the ground. He conquered all of this and then some. And he wanted to keep going. So the Most High made him sick. Why? Because it was time for him to go. And by the way, here you have Carmania. This is a really good map. Here you have Carmania, which are the Elamites, and that's what's being stirred up right now. These Boers, they're being stirred up, and they're fucking Esau up. Now Esau is fucking up a lot of their infrastructure, and they're hitting below the belt because they're striking refineries and schools and different things of that nature. So don't be surprised if those Persians retaliate with the same underhanded tactics. And that means that if they keep this up, by somebody said about a week or so, you should see within the next couple of weeks, you should see if this continues, which it looks like it's going to just keep going, you're going to see that gas prices exploding pretty much, going through the roof. So it says here that he touched not the ground, right? And touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes, and that notable horn, which is a power, represents Alexander the Greek. NLT, while I was watching, suddenly a male goat appeared from the west, crossing the land so swiftly that he didn't even touch the ground. See? Why? Because they couldn't stop him. This goat, which had one very large horn between his eyes, which is Alexander the Creep. All right? So that's the main point I wanted to get there. So it said that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how have the golden city ceased, or how have the present ceased, the golden city ceased. NLT, once again, you will taunt the king of Babylon, and that's what we're doing. So that means that we're at the end, because this has been going on since the 60s, and how much more so now, where, back then they still had some type of authority and power, on the world, but that power is waning, because even back then they were losing these conflicts and wars and battles. You will say the mighty man has been destroyed. Yes, your insolence is ended. Yeah, so and this is why Yahweh said you can't go into a strong man's house, at least you first bind the strong man. And this is what Yahweh Bashim Yahushua is doing, is they're binding the strong man. This is why King David said this, and he wasn't talking, this wasn't something that was happening during King David's time. This is something that he saw in the future. All right, Psalm 60 verse 9. Who will bring me into the strong city? Who will lead me into Edom? And back then, Edom wasn't strong. I mean, they had a force to be reckoned with, but not against Israel, because King David, Joab, and them, they were kicking Esau's ass. It says that they wiped out the Edomites that were in that region at that time. So this was actually a vision that he saw in the future. NLT, who will bring me into the fortified city? Who will bring me victory over Edom? See? So it wasn't talking about back then, because they had the victory over Esau. Esau was in subjection under them. Eventually later on they revolted according to the prophecy, but he wasn't talking about back then. It's talking about now, because Edom would grow to a dominant empire, beginning with the Greeks, trickling down to the Romans, and then coming up to date to the Renaissance period, with the total completion of the 7 heads and 10 horns. That's why it says, who was able to make war with the beast in the book of Revelation 13. But now we're at the point where that power, that influence, that hammer-like tactic is not working on the world anymore. They figured you out. Just like an elite fighter, someone just got their number, I mean, this guy whoops everybody's ass, but this one particular individual, he just can't win. He just can't beat this guy, no matter how hard he trains, no matter how many different ways he tries to outmaneuver the individual. The individual just got his number. So Iran got America and Israel's number. There's nothing you could do. And let's say even if this war was to die down, which it may or may not, it's still gonna ramp back up because it's prophetic. And you best better believe that these Iranians are not gonna forget how they took out their supreme leader and the wicked way they did it. First they this is why the Iranians don't respect America or them small hats. The reason why is because they'll tell you because when you offer peace talks, you're not supposed to attack the enemy, no matter who it is. But these devils don't play fair. That's why they say you already did it 2 or 3 times. We're not going for it. We're not going to stop until we feel it's sufficient. And they pretty much put out a hit on the orange man. They say you did that to us. You better watch. Pretty much, you better watch your back, Mr. Retread Man. Inside joke. All right. So going back to, matter of fact, there's a little bit more. It says, "Well, not thou, O Yahweh Bashem Al-Shai, which had us cast us off, and thou, O power, which didst not go out with our armies." Yeah, because the King David saw in the future how Esau was going to become a great military might and power, a force to be reckoned with. Just like the Apostle John, when he saw in his vision, he said, "No one was able to make war with the beast. Give us help from trouble, for vain is the help of man. Through the Most High we shall do valiantly, for he it is that shall tread down our enemies." And that's why the very first individual that Yahweh Shai is coming to see, shout out, to the brothers out there in Indianapolis, he's coming to see, Esau, the Edomites. All right, because they're the ones that's in power right now. So back in Isaiah 14 and 5 now, the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Al-Shai, had broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the ruler. So the Heavenly Father is the one that's systematically breaking them down, cutting the ring off, picking them apart, pretty much, making sparring partners out of them, as the lingo goes in boxing. Now here it is, this elite fighter, the Lord is pretty much breaking them down systematically, reducing them to a sparring partner. It says, "He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke." So you have to remember, these devils have been doing this to the world. Like I mentioned the other day, the Panama Deception. This is it right here. You can watch this. You could actually watch it. This is an actual documentary, the Panama Deception. I just clicked on it so I could have it, in my history, so I could watch it, Lord's will, later. And pretty much they show you in this how devious these devils are. You go into a place that the people are unsuspecting because they didn't want to renew the treaty of the Panama Canal. So you go at night with laser technology, the DEWs, and you pretty much fry that place. I mean, totally annihilate those people, horrify them. So you're going to be horrified. You overwhelm people with your brutality, with your bully tactics, and pretty much that's what's going to come upon you, and no one's going to be able to stop it. So going back, NLT, you struck the people with endless blows of rage. See? And now the people are mad, and they're fighting back. And held the nations in your angry grip with unrelenting tyranny. See? says, he who smote the people in wrath and with a continual stroke, he that ruled the nations in anger is persecuted, and none hinder. So no one is going to be able to stop that ass whooping that the Lord is going to put on you, first and foremost through Russia, Iran, and if Russia, China, some of your own allies, among the 10 horns, and the EU, so on and so forth. And no one's going to be able to stop that. You ain't going to have no missiles. You're the land of unwalled villages. Here it is, like we were just, I was just highlighting here with this individual. I believe his name is Danny something. He pretty much saying here, Iran's $1 million missile splits into hundreds of warheads, and America has no way to stop it. So here it is, you have $1 million equipment, right? Inside joke. And it splits into multiple warheads, hundreds of warheads. And there's no way for you to stop it. So you're being frustrated. So that's why he has this stress level, which is pretty much should have been over here, off the meat rack, off the Richter scale, because you have no way to stop it. I think this is another one of his channels, Money Over History and Geld über Geschichte, something like that. So Money Over History, and he has other channels. Arsenal Economics, that might be him. That might be a different dude. No, that's a different dude, I think. So he does very good videos. Somebody said, what a game changer. Yeah, it's a game changer because you don't have anything to fight against it, and it's frustrating you. This is why you're begging, your man that you kicked to the curb, what's his name, Zelensky. You're begging him for the technology to be able to, to fight against these drones, because since you wouldn't help, they had to figure it out, and they did. But even that's only going to be so effective. So it says, the whole earth is at rest and is quiet, and they break forth into singing, and oh boy, is that going to be a glorious day when you fucking devils finally go down, especially you goddamn small heads, man. God damn, you motherfuckers are a fucking parasitic nation. Damn, you motherfuckers are evil and wicked. You can't go down fast enough. And that's why when you go down, the whole world is going to be at rest. Because if you would have left the Persians to themselves, the Iranians, they wasn't fucking with nobody. They would just had their arsenals. They were trying to build infrastructure, for energy, so on and so forth. If you would have never struck them, they would have never struck. You see? But you motherfuckers cannot stay out of war. You're an evil, wicked nation. Revelation 6:4. It says, and there went out another horse that was red. And this represents you. The reason why it mentions the color red is because it represents the Edomites. The name Edom goes back to the Hebrew word Adawam, which means red. And the word horse sometimes is referring to an actual horse, but the word horse itself in the scriptures represents power. That's why the scriptures use it as some men trust in horses and chariots. They trust in that power and their military might. And this particular power is red. And there's all different types of references in Revelation where it calls it a scarlet color, or the red beast, the dragon, the red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, so on and so forth. It all goes back to red. Why? Because this is the Lord. This is the Lord's symbolic way of letting us know that this is talking about the Edomite nation, which is the red nation. It says, and power was given him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth. And this is exactly what they're doing. The Lord hath given them power to take peace from the earth. It says, and that they should kill one another. This goes into into your civil war and that situation that happened with that Marine where they broke his arm, you best believe, as Elder Pastor said, that went viral. You know, so that's causing dissension within the ranks of the military. Pretty much saying, damn, you know, here it is, we over there risking our lives fighting, you know, for the rights and the safety of these assholes here in America. They won't even help us. They won't even hear us out. They'll break your arm. You know, so that's going to cause a great dissension, and that's what you have now. You know, you have other Marines that are putting up signs. You know, there's one Marine that had a sign up. He's not going to go fight the war for, and he has a picture of a small hat. You know, that one picture with the big schnoz, that big evil cheese-eating motherfucker. You know, because they're tired of it. And they see the bullshit, and they're going over there and getting their legs blown off, getting their balls blown off, getting metal plates in their heads, you know, dying, you know, coming back with all type of trauma, you know, post-traumatic stress, PTSD, and all that, all for what? For nothing. For those small hats. And they're like, they ain't having it. And LT, then another horse appeared, a red one. Esau, its rider was given a mighty sword and the authority to take peace from the earth. So the Lord gave him the authority to take peace from the earth. Remember, Spirit's been having me say for a while that Yahushua, as Isaac, gave Esau that blessing. And Yahushua is the one that's going to come back and take it from him. Back then, Yahushua, as Isaac, he loved Esau more than Jacob. But now when he's coming back, he's coming to annihilate, trample, stamp under his foot Esau, and take back the blessing that he gave to him. Because that sword, a mighty sword, and the authority to take peace from the earth was taken from him. Why? Because of prophecy, Job 9:24. It says the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. So the Lord gave these devils the power and the authority over the whole planet Earth. And what do? They deceive, they cheat, they lie, they murder, they rape, they rob, they pillage. He covered the faces of the judges thereof, and that's what he does. And how did he do this? By putting up his face instead of the face of the Most High, Yahushua, the angels, the Israelites. And then they get mad, you know, if you speak on it. Or if you talk about it. You know, they ban your channels, you know. Now there's something out, you know, I know a brother that's a fact checker could check it. They said that anyone caught in the land of the small hats putting up pictures or videos of what's going on in Israel, they automatically get 5 years in prison. I forget where it was at. Was it, I don't think it was Beirut. I forget exactly the place that they mentioned, but just in general, if you're caught taking pictures or video of any of what's going on in the land of the small hats, automatically, that's an automatic 5-year prison sentence. Because they don't want the world to see the devastation that the Iranians are causing over there. You know, so if a brother, you know, one of them deep fact checkers, you know, if brothers are up, you know, can you know, fact check that, you know, bring that up, you know, just to see if it's actually true or not, you know. And I'm gonna have to keep turning it around because, you know, like I said, the way my computer is set, the monitor is behind me, the one that I usually watch while I'm doing the lesson, because my laptop, you know, is pretty much cooked. So it says, if not, where and who is he? So that the earth was given into the hands of this devil. That's nothing but Satan out there. You ain't supposed to be doing that to a car, fucking dickheads. That fucks your car, your engine up. Nathan is to give. To give, put, set. To give, bestow, grant. permit. So you've been permitted, you've been given the permission, to take control of the planet Earth. And now you're at the time where, okay, the Lord is making inquiry as to what the hell's going on in the world that I gave you. Position. Let's see. 5-year penalty claim report circulated on March 2026 suggests that individual. Oh shit. All right, let me just pull it up over here. Let's see. 5-year penalty claim report circulated in March 2026 suggests that individuals posting, streaming, or sharing of videos of damage or military locations from current conflicts, such as with Iran, could face significant legal consequences with penalties of up to 5 years in prison. Targeted content, the restrictions specifically target footage of missile impacts, drone strikes, damage to strategic facilities, and air defense interception. See? It says, purpose of restriction, authorities frame these measures as security necessities to prevent adversaries from gaining real-time intelligence, maintaining a blackout over impact zones to protect urban defense readiness, and prevent the aiding of further attacks. It's bullshit. They just don't want, the world to see how they're getting their ass handed to them. All right? So the Lord, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. So they have that power, and it was given to them. That's why we read in Revelation 6 and 4 in the NLT, then another horse appeared, a red one. His rider was given a mighty sword and the authority to take peace from the earth. And there was war and slaughter everywhere. And that's what we see. So since this man has been in power, since America's been in power, it's been at war more years than it's been at peace. The majority of its empire has been at war. Possibly, 20 years they were in that war out of all those 250 years, So they've been at war ever since they've been in power. Why? Because they are a people of war. Same thing with the Greeks, same thing with the Romans. It's no different. You're the Edomites. You can't help it. You were bred for war. But you done gone too far. You've been weighed in the balance and you've been found wanting. So going back to Isaiah, it says, yea, the fir trees rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon saying, since thou art laid down, no feller has come up against us. Yeah, even the trees are going to be happy. Because, you have something called deforestation, which Elder Apostle Gabar goes into all the time, about deforestation. Where you pretty much, you're so greedy, you're cutting down all of pretty much the trees of the planet to continue to build, to continue to consume. And you're pretty much knocking the whole ecosystem of the world off, because trees, unbeknownst to the world, trees take in carbon dioxide, if I'm not mistaken, on the carbon dioxide, and they use that, and then they convert it into oxygen. So the trees are pretty much like a filter that the Lord put on the earth to clear or clean up the quality of the air. And this is why you have cities, metropolises that are so condensed with fog and smog, because there's no trees there to clean up all of that mess. And what does the devil do? He continuously cuts them down. Like, you have what they call down in Brazil, you have the the Amazon jungle, which they call the lungs of the earth. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's the Amazon jungle. They call it the lungs of the earth. Why? Because they pretty much absorb all of the toxins and the pollution in the air, and take it in and convert that to back to oxygen, clean oxygen. So they're the natural filters of the earth, and you're constantly knocking them down. Just like you're taking the natural garbage men out of the sea, you know, the whales and the sharks and the, you know, scavengers, and, you know, the shellfish and all of that, the octopus and all that. You're taking them all out of the sea, which is causing, you know, what, like when you have good and bad bacteria, it's an overgrowth of the bad in the sea. It's an overgrowth of the bad in the air, you know, in the water, so on and so forth, because it's not balanced, because you're destroying everything with your greed. Second is a 6-9. Esau represents the end of this age, and Jacob represents the beginning of the new age. Yeah, because this devil has to go down, and he will go down, and we're witnessing him go down. Remember, Yahweh said, I saw Satan as lightning fall from heaven. The name Satan, people think it's talking about the spiritual demon Satan. No, it's talking about the name Satan is not a mythological name. It's not a mystic name. The name Satan, when you break it down, Shaitan means adversary. Who is the adversary of the Most High on the planet Earth? Esau, the so-called white man. You can see on all fronts. It says, hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet the that coming, meaning destruction, the grave, you know, also the condition that you're going to be subjected to, which is total slavery in the kingdom of heaven. It stirreth up the dead for thee, which is talking about the other nations. And like as Elder Pastor brought out before, this is proof that this is talking about reincarnation. NLT says, in the place of the dead, there is excitement over your arrival. The spirits of world leaders and mighty kings long dead stand up to see you. See? So this is another, you know, scripture that could be used in the NLT, you know, for reincarnation. So all of these different leaders you see worldwide, you know, the Ayatollahs, these different premiers, these, you know, czars, which they're not called czars. I don't think they call them czars anymore. No, they don't call them czars anymore. The last one was Tsar Nicholas II, I believe it was. You know, he was the last czar because they destroyed that empire through the Bolsheviks. You know, that's where they had. Anthony Sutton wrote a book called Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, because the Bolsheviks were on the side of the small hats to overthrow the monarchy of Russia and to steal their wealth, because the Tsar Nicholas II didn't want a central bank in Russia, you know, because he was a Christian, you know. So there's a whole history on that. So it says, hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee. And who are the dead? These different world leaders and the nations, even all the chief ones of the earth, which are their leaders. It hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. Right, so now the kings of the nations are pretty much up in arms, and they're watching very closely this whole situation going on in Iran. And they're watching how, let me see something. Oh, how big, how many Irans fit into America? Let's just see something. Approximately 116 to 120 Ireland. What the fuck? I put Iran. How the fuck you gonna give me Ireland? Iran can fit into the United States approximately 5 times over. So Iran is a fifth the size of America. You can fit 5 Irans in America, and they're having a hard time with America and Israel combined together. They're having a hard time fighting against the Iranians. So you don't think that the Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans and other nations are watching this closely and seeing, damn, this bully, is not getting away with the shit that he was doing before. He's not able to, to exert that bully spirit. The bully done got old and decrepit and lost his influence, lost the fear. See, the nations don't fear America like they used to. And this is even showing even more. Like I mentioned, the reference of an elite fighter, that everyone's scared to fight. But then there's one individual that was supposed to get knocked out the first round. Pretty much he had a hard time. They went the full length of the fight, and he exposed the chinks in the armor, although he lost. But the other fighters that were nervous to fight this one individual said, oh, now we know how to get this guy. We know how to defeat him. So they see in the chinks in the armor. So 5 Irans can fit into America. So America's having a hard time, fighting this nation that's, a fifth of the size of America. If I said that correctly. Let's see, chinks chink in the armor. It's chink in the armor, meaning. A chink in the armor is an idiom meaning a small, specific, or unexpected vulnerability in an otherwise strong, secure, or confident person, plan, or entity. It represents a weak point, similar to an Achilles heel, where an attack or failure can occur. Like you have, let's say you have, I believe they did that in the movie Kingdom of Heaven, where the Ottoman Turks were fighting. Well, I think it was the Ottoman Turks. Was it the Ottoman Turks or was it the Ishmaelites or both? They were fighting against Jerusalem, right? And there was one particular wall, according to the movie, that was more vulnerable. So they focused their firepower on that particular wall. Why? Because it was the weakest wall, and they finally got it broken down, and that's how they got into the city. So they're looking at it as they see a weakness in America, and they see America scrambling, they see America frustrated, and here the people in America don't know. They thinking that they're winning because the shit that Trump is pumping out, the shit that the American media is pumping out, and even in these different talking head shows, I'll be listening sometimes, when I'm in the car, because I can't, my phone won't, all kind of shit going on. My Bluetooth connects to the phone, to the car, but you can't hear nothing. And I tried all kind of shit, so Satan is just attacking on all levels. But I listen to these different talking heads, and I'm saying all these motherfuckers are all talking, good for the small hats. Every last one of them. Every channel you turn to, 660 and 720 and 8 something, it's 820, and all these different channels that have different talking points in the news. They're all talking on behalf of the small hats. So I just I had to, after a while, turn off that bullshit, because it's all bullshit. But then around the world, they're actually seeing the truth, because the reports are coming out, all around. That's why certain alternative medias and certain alternative news channels are not allowed in America, because they're telling you straight up, what's really going on, and the world is watching. So chink in the armor, the idiom chink in the armor refers to an area of vulnerability. See, it's an area of vulnerability. Origins, the phrase literally refers to a narrow opening, a chink, in a knight's metal suit of armor. Yeah, because you go to war so many times, right? And then after a while, from the clanking of the swords and spears and different arrows and shit, you might get a little opening in your armor, and the enemy sees it, and what do you think he's going to do? He's going to go for it so that he can pierce or penetrate that weakness and take you out. Usage. It is used metaphorically to describe a weak spot in a person's character, a business strategy, a defense system, or an argument, and that's pretty much a defense system. So they see in the chink in the armor of America's defense system, and it's not looking good. So back to Isaiah 14 and 10, all they, this is where we get the name or the title of the lesson, all they shall speak and say unto thee, art thou also become weak as we? Right, because they're seeing the chinks in your armor. Art thou become like unto us? Let's see what it says in the NLT. With one voice they all cry out, now you are as weak as we are. See? So now you're as weak as we are. Why? Because you lack, the vitamins and minerals. Inside joke. You lack the authority and power and influence and fear that you once had. Is lacking. Why? Because the Lord is systematically breaking you down. Because it's the time of your end. And all empires had their time and place. Time and chance happeneth to all men. Daniel 5 and 25. And this is the writing that is written that was written, many tekel upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Many, the Most I have numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Finisher. NLT. This is what these words mean. Many numbered. The Most High has numbered the days of your reign and has brought it to an end. That's it. It says, tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and are found wanting. So pretty much in the NLT, tekel means weighed. You have been weighed on the balances and have not measured up. So you're not measuring up because you, from your so-called founding, you claim that you were a Christian Judeo-Christian nation, but you're not. Everything that you do goes contrary to what the scriptures say. And that's what the Lord said unto the wicked. The Lord saith, what hast thou to do to declare my statutes, or that thou shouldest take my covenant in thy mouth, seeing thou hatest instructions and castest my words behind thee. See? Now we're going to look up. Matter of fact, let's look up finished it. And then we'll look up wanting. He has numbered thy kingdom and finished it. The word for finished it is shalom. To be complete, be finished, be sound, finished. To finish, bring to an end, render in full. So the Lord has brought you to an end. This is the end. Inside joke. And pretty much you are at the point of your exiting strategy. You're pretty much like that defeated, champion in the ring that now has to leave the ring with his head bowed down. But you're still fighting, because the fight isn't over yet. But you pretty much, as each round goes by, your what's the word I'm looking for? Your confidence is waning more and more with each blow and with each round that goes by, each second that goes by. Your confidence starts to go less and less. Your head starts to sink lower and lower. You're through because the Lord finished you. You're at your end. You had a good run. You had the longest run of any empire. You had the longest run of any nation, going back to the Greeks, the Romans, during the Renaissance period until now. And it's time for you to go. And now the word for wanting, and I found wanting, Wade, matter of fact, let me look up the word, Wade Thaqual, which goes to the word shaqual. Shaqual is, I believe that's shekel. To weigh, let me see something. Yeah, I believe that goes into the word shekel, if I'm not mistaken. Thaqual, to weigh, to be weighed. Yeah, tekel, shekel. So it goes into the word shekel, a unit of weight, shekel. So you have been weighed, and you don't measure up. And I found what? Wanting. Chasayar, lacking, wanting, deficient. You're deficient. This whole bravado, this rah-rah spirit, you talking that talk, but all of the evidence is showing different, that you're not measuring up to, what you're telling the world, because you're at your end. The Lord has finished your empire. And now you're at the end, just going through the motions. You're fighting out of desperation. And the Lord got you fighting out of desperation. Just like within the last couple of plagues in Egypt, pretty much, Pharaoh was only fighting through sheer willpower because the Lord kept putting the spirit in him to do it. But he wanted to give up. But that pride wouldn't let him. And then the spirit that the Lord put on him to continue to harden his heart. Even after losing, he went after Israel and then really lost. Because the Lord took him and his whole army out. So that was a devastating defeat and blow to the Egyptian empire back then. And they never rose to that prominence ever again. Dig it. All right, so going back to Isaiah 14 and 10. All they shall speak and say unto thee, art thou also become weak as we, art thou become like unto us. Yeah, because you're weak. Because they, through the ability to trade here in America, they built up a good economic system. Most nations. And that economic system that they built, they used that instead of just lavishly living, they use that to build up their military, and that's why we're going to come right back to this. In Joel 3 and 9, it says, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, the nations, prepare war. So war is being prepared. Wake up the mighty men, right? Because it's now time to go to war. Make all the necessary preparations for war, for battle. Let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. So take all of your agricultural, tools and money and invest it into your defense. NLT, hammer your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Train even your weaklings to be warriors. All right. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, to gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord Yahweh Bashem El Shai. Because once this battle is roaring, raging, which is World War III, Yahweh Shai and the angels are going to come down and finish him off. Let the heathen be wakened. Why? Because it's time for prophecies to be fulfilled. And come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, Yahweh Shaphat, the Most High's judgment, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. Yeah, because this is the time of the Lord's judgment. That's why it says, my determination is to gather the nations, that I may pour upon them, my fury, all my indignation. So back in Isaiah 14 and 11, thy pomp is brought down to the grave, right? That pride, that excessive pride, that hubris that you had at one time is brought down to the grave. Brought down to rest. Like that bully, that eventually the person that he's been bullying stands up to them and clocks him. Now he becomes tributary to that individual. When he sees him, he has his head down. Hey, how you doing, man? How you doing? But you used to bully me before, remember? What happened to that bully? Through. And the noise of thy vials, this lousy ass fucking music. Trying to listen to a little something yesterday because I was tired of hearing that bullshit, that bullshit news, and it was just like noise. Every once in a while you catch it, old song, and even the old songs are kind of like, tired of hearing them. It said the worm is spread under thee and the worms cover thee. This represents corrosion, corruption. That's why your whole infrastructure is falling apart, because the way you established this empire, America, here on the soils of America, was on the blood of the children of Israel. So there's no way you can have a prosperous, righteous, benevolent empire prosper on the blood of the children of the Most High, the Israelites. So-called Native American Indians, so-called Negroes, so-called Seminole Indians, so-called Mexican Indians, and others. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? Lucifer represents light bearer. It's not talking about the spiritual demon Satan. Really, this word here, Lucifer, should have not been set up as a personalized name. It should have been small case. Because even when you go to the Latin, right? When you go to the Vulgate and the Latin, right? Here you have the word Lucifer, or the name Lucifer, but what is it? Small case, all small case, because it's not a personal name. Pretty much, it's a it's a description for light bearer, O morning star, day star, carriers of the light, which represents the Illuminati. So how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, from your great stature? And it's not talking about actual heaven, even though the planes and drones and missiles and helicopters that are in the skies are going to be, brought down by destruction when Yahushua and the angels come. But this is talking about falling from your status, just like Capernaum. Capernaum was a city that was in their heavenly state. They were living it up, living lavish. But the Lord said they were going to be brought down to hell, meaning they were going to be destroyed. And that's what Esau is going to be, that's going to be done to Esau. O Lucifer, son of the morning, how art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? So you weaken the nations, and now is your time to go down. You reap what you sow. The chickens are coming home to roost, which pretty much means you reap what you sow. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. Right, and they have ascended into heaven. You got space stations up there, you have satellites, you have planes, helicopters, drones, you have all kind of stuff going up into the heavens. You got to remember, sometimes I look at them big ass planes and I'm like, man, the Lord gave this devil a hell of a technology to be able to get that heavy ass thing off the ground and actually fly in the air. But that's because knowledge will increase. And then the prophecy had to be fulfilled. I will exalt my throne above the stars of the Most High, which they did. They didn't go to the moon, but they do have space stations. They do have a space shuttle that goes up. They have satellites. That's how they're able to broadcast signals. Yes, satellites and different electrical, technologies around the world are you have underground cables, but you also have, signals in the air, where because that's what a satellite does. A satellite sends broadcast signals into the air, and those signals come back down. And this is why the scriptures say that the Lord will open the books in the firmament of the heaven. What is the firmament? That's the ozone layer. That's where you have these satellites. So the signals from the earth are broadcasting to the signals, up in the sky, and then being rebroadcasted down so that everyone can see, so they can see all together what? This truth. Because ultimately what really matters is this truth. The internet was created for the purpose of this gospel to be preached. Because Yahushua didn't say in the news will be preached throughout the four corners of the earth, then shall the end come. No. He said, and this gospel of the truth shall be preached unto all the world for a witness against him, and then shall the end come. And that's what we're witnessing right now, the end of Esau's empire. And what's causing it is just words, but they're powerful words. Words of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, which are living and breathing. It's a living document. The Bible is a living document that's living and breathing. And every time it's spoken, it causes damage to Esau's empire. It says, I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation, which are the Israelites, in the sides of the north, here in North America. It says, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Right, and they have ascended above the clouds. No other nation has accomplished that feat, to ascend above the clouds. This is literal. This is not a parabolic speech. It's parabolic speech in the sense of the way it's written, poetic in the way that the sense that it's written, but it actually means that they actually have gone up over the sky. I've flown many times. I've actually seen the plane going up. I've actually seen the plane going through the clouds. I've actually seen the plane on top of the clouds and watching the clouds underneath. So the Lord gave this man the technology to fulfill this prophecy and others. I will be like the Most High. This is why they're fucking with people's anatomy, fucking with their, bodies, trying to make man live forever, merging man and machine, CRISPR, the CRISPR program, gain of function, and all these different technologies that Esau is using to so-called enhance the body, the Internet of Bodies, Internet of Things, so on and so forth. Because this is their pretty much their plans for the future. Their agenda for the future is to have a nation of people that are obedient to the government, that are obedient really not just to the government, but to the international bankers. Pretty much a nation of robots. Says, yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. Yeah, because you're going down. And you're going into captivity. You're going into slavery. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms? And that's how the world is going to view you. Like pretty much you're a caveman that the Lord allowed to escape out of his prison sentence and to be established as pretty much as the so-called intellectuals, high IQ people, the people that have created all civilizations. No, you have stolen all civilizations. You have lied and cheated. You have destroyed civilizations. You have stolen the identity of civilizations and adapted them to yourselves, and said that any nation out there that had any type of brown pigment in them, were not, they didn't contribute anything to society. It was us that civilized you. No. It was the other way around. We civilized you. Remember, you the wild moose. You're the man that has the caveman history. We didn't have the caveman history. You do. This is why you try to say, when you try to research the caveman history, they'll tell you, 4 BC. I'm sorry, not 4 BC, 4 billion BC, or 400,000 BC, or 10,000 BC. Because you're ashamed of that history. And that history happened, prior to you coming up as the Greeks, but it really happened during the time of the, so-called Dark Ages, when you were reduced to an animal, the wild moose or the wild man. And then you systematically, systematically, after a period of time, the Lord took that curse off of you, that prison sentence off of you, and you started to get back into power through the Renaissance, all throughout so-called Europe. Then you took over, those empires that were already established, and then once you were civilized, you acted like you were those people. That's why to this day, you have Edomites sitting in England, at the, on the throne of England, acting like they're royalty, all snobby and snooty, proper etiquette, and eat with this fork. You have like 10 different forks and spoons and knives, and you got to eat in a certain direction. There's a certain way you got to eat, a certain etiquette. You got that from us. You weren't eating like that. You were grunting, and eating like wild animals, in those caves. But then you want the world to believe that all dark nations were just animals, that you had to domesticate. And if it wasn't for you, that they would still be in that animalistic state. Bullshit. So NLT, everyone there will stare at you and ask, can this be the one who shook the earth and made the kingdoms of the world tremble? Yeah, this piece of shit. And like at the end of the movie Wizard of Oz, when Toto pulled back the curtain, pretty much it was revealed who this individual was. Let's see. See? They pulled back the curtain. Who was it? The dog. The faithful dog. Toto. Get rid of that. Look at that. The faithful dog Toto pulled back the curtain, and what do you see? An old decrepit bastard. The Rothschild. Rockefeller. And the world gonna be, is this the man? Let me see if they got a better picture when the devil turns around, because he actually turns around. There he goes. And you can see right there, he looks guilty. this is not a very good picture. See if I can find another one. There we go. Hopefully this is a good one. If we can't get a good one, then you pretty much get the idea. Come on, man. There we go. What does that expression on his face look like? Oh shit, I'm caught. And what is he doing? Pulling all the strings behind the scenes, behind the curtain. And he was exposed. And this is the first step of him before he goes down, being exposed. And what does he look like? A small hat. Manipulating everything behind the scenes. Is this the man? Matter of fact, I gotta read that one more time, NLT. Everyone there will stare at you and ask, can this be the one who shook the earth and made the kingdoms of the world tremble? That made the world as a wilderness? Yeah, you destroyed the whole earth. Matter of fact, let me see what it says in the NLT. Is this the one who destroyed the world, see, and made it into a wasteland? Is this the king who demolished the world's greatest cities and had no mercy on his prisoners? Yeah. That made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened out the house of his prisoners. You see the world today how it is. Look, you look at the condition of the earth. This is what happens when you let a madman loose, when you let a madman rule. This is what happens, and this is the lesson that the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushua is trying to teach us. Well, not trying, he's teaching us. See, when you don't do what I tell you to do, this is what happens. You got this base individual that takes over the planet, and look what the fuck he turns the planet into. A goddamn wasteland. And that's why in the kingdom of heaven, we're going to be changed. The laws are going to be put into our inward parts. Our bodies are going to be changed. Our minds are going to be changed. Laws are going to be inserted. And we're going to be perfect. To run a perfect, righteous kingdom. Give me a second. And this is why the Lord is establishing the future rulers of the earth on the planet before these devils' faces, and they can't even see it. They mock and ridicule because they can't fathom in their mind, as to like, how in the hell you guys gonna be the ones that's gonna be ruling anything? You niggas and spicks and spooks and wetbacks and tontos, Look at the condition that you're in. Yeah, but this is a part of our punishment for disobeying. This is what disobedience leads to. But thou art cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch, and as the raiment of those that are slain, thrust through with a sword. Yeah, what do you do when you have, a warrior that goes to battle? He's a good warrior, great warrior, but somebody took him out. They killed him, and his clothes are all, his war clothing is all blood stained and soaked and all that. What do you do with that? You don't save that. You throw that out. So you're going to be discarded because you already fulfilled your purpose. Your purpose was to destroy the earth, to show the world what it is to be wicked, so that the Lord can come back around and judge you and show what the reward of wickedness is. I'm talking about on a major scale. And that's why it's going to be a great conflagration on the soils of America, which is just a fancy way of saying a great major fire. That's going to be what the scriptures call the lake of fire. And it's not no fucking river over there in the land of Edom going to the valley of Megiddo or whatever the hell them clowns say. That go down to the stones of the pit as a carcass trodden under feet. Yeah. You're going to be discarded. Thou shalt not be joined with them in burial, because thou hast destroyed thy land and slain thy people. The seed of evildoers shall never be renowned. So pretty much you're not going to get any accolades. The only thing you're going to be remembered for in the kingdom of heaven is your demonic, wicked, rule that you had, on the planet. The wickedness that you perpetrated. And how that you are the basis of men, and the Lord took the basis of men to confound us, to teach us a lesson. Prepare slaughter for his children, for the iniquity of their fathers. This, in the same chapter, you have two examples of reincarnation. Prepare slaughter for his children, for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities. Yeah, because if they do, what are they going to do? If these devils were allowed, if these devils were to go down and then allowed to get back into power, what the fuck do you think they're going to do? Bishop Nathaniel talking about after 1,000 years they're going to get the upper hand and put us back in slavery. Are you out of your fucking mind? If they're allowed to, there was a scripture that just came to mind. Oh, Brakatehal Bashim Al-Shai. Revelation, I believe that's chapter 9. And 20. And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, meaning the international bankers that are going to be in these bunkers, that are going to survive. And by the way, they said that Bill Gates, I don't know what year that video was made, they said that he had 11 doomsday bunkers made, and them things are like huge. There was a video that I was watching, I don't know if that was, I think that was on Instagram. Brother sent me the video. It says, yet repented not of their work, the work of their hands, the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and of wood, which neither can see nor hear nor walk. So they're not going to repent. So that's why the Lord said, when you go down, you're not going to be renowned again. You're not going to fill the face of the cities anymore. You're not going to possess the land nor fill the face of the world with cities. Why? Because you're going to go right back to the same bullshit that you did. Because these devils think that once this shithole America goes down, and the world gets out of their grasp, that they're going to have something called continuity of government. And that's not going to happen. The continuity of government is not going to be a continuity of government. There's going to be a new sheriff in town. That's Yahushai. Continuity of government, COG, C-O-G, is the principle and set of procedures designed to ensure that the U.S. government's essential functions, including legal authority and leadership succession, continue to operate during and after a catastrophic emergency such as a nuclear attack or major disaster. It involves coordinated efforts across all three branches, executive, legislative, judicial, to maintain constitutional governance. See? So they're not going to repent. They're going to try to reestablish, rebuild. They'll say, they will rebuild, but I will throw down. They will call them the borders of wickedness. Neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. That's why they got to be put down. Because if the devil is allowed to come out of those bunkers and rebuild again, he's going to continue on that same trajectory. He's going to continue on with his one world government. He's going to continue on with this, system that that he's trying to set up in place where everyone's going to be micro-C-hipped. He wants to keep that going. So if his whole empire is destroyed and they're allowed to rebuild, what do you think they're going to rebuild to? What do you think they're going to do? They're not going to be righteous. They're going to be like, you know what? Oh, maybe we shouldn't have done everything that we do. We got to have a change. We got to turn over a new leaf. We know what? We're gonna do better. Nah. They're gonna keep doing the same shit that they've been doing. So that's why the Lord's gonna take them out. Isaiah 14:22. For I will rise up against them, saith the Lord Yahweh Bashem Shai of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name and remnant and son and nephew, saith the Lord Yahweh Bashem Shai. Why? Because you have, what is the remnant? Remainder, descendant, son and nephew, uncles, fathers, all of that. Why? Because you're not going to continue to rule. The Lord's going to take you all out. And after you serve your 1,000 years of captivity, then you're going to all be rounded up, every last one of you, and burnt. That's going to be your send-off, your final hurrah. It's going to be a send-off. Not a final hurrah, but just a send-off. I will also make it a possession for the bitter. Yeah, because this place, America, will be inhabited after the smoke clears for many, many years. We don't know how long that's going to be. It's going to be inhabited by desert creatures. Desert, unclean birds, reptiles, and all of that. And pools of water. And I will sweep it with the besom of destruction. Yeah, because what is that besom of destruction? That wall of fire. Saith the Lord Yahweh Bashem Shai of hosts. Let's see what it says in the NLT. I will make Babylon a desolate place of owls, filled with swamps and marshes. I will sweep the land with the broom of destruction. I, Yahweh Bashem Shai of heaven's armies, have spoken. So let it be written, so let it be done. All right? So that's pretty much it. So you devils are finished. All these militaries down there, they're down there to get your ass. And this individual here, I forget his name, Iran's $1 million missile splits into hundreds of warheads. So this is frustrating, America in their military strategies. Let me see if I can get that back up. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay, chink in the armor, how many times? Oh yeah, and Iran fits into America 5 times. Persian Empire, Sun Tzu, outfox. Unpredictable strategy, meaning this is what Iran is using, unpredictable strategy. An unpredictable strategy is a competitive approach designed to keep opponents or competitors guessing by avoiding predictable patterns, behaviors, or decisions, right? You're coming in an unorthodox style, unorthodox way. Pretty much what Iran is using is, modern warfare tactics. They're not, resorting to those old, antiquated battlefield strategies that America is used to. It says, and this is why Esau had such a hard time with Gad when they came to fight here. Even the Latin tribes, so-called Latin tribes, when they came to fight. Because even though, the so-called Latin tribes didn't have superior, weaponry, but their tactics, coming in and out of the forests and jungles and all that, were fucking you up. But the only reason why you were able to win is because it was prophecy. It says it leverages surprise, rapid adaptation, and sometimes calculated, erratic, or novel actions to disrupt an opponent's planning, gain a competitive advantage, and create uncertainty, often used in military, sports, and business, in this case, military. So it's creating uncertainty within the ranks of the U.S. military. Because they're used to straight up just, being able to bomb things. And from what, videos that are coming out, the Iranians are deceiving the American army, the Israeli army. They're China, I believe it was China that was sending them blow up helicopters, which are fake helicopters that these devils are blowing up, thinking they're blowing up the real shit. There's other videos showing that they're jets and helicopters that are painted on the ground that these devils are dropping $1 million equipment on, $1 million bombs, wasting that. So they're fighting a hell of an unpredictable strategic war on America. And this is all prophecy. And eventually Russia's going to step in and others. Whether this dies down or not, eventually you're going to mix it up with Russia and with Iran and other of Russia's allies. And you know, being that China is a major superpower, you know, they're gonna get involved somehow too. So it remains to be seen. So pretty much this has been, you know, thou also become weak as we. So pretty much these nations have figured out your strategy. So the champion of the world, the hammer of the earth is being broken down systematically, and the other nations are watching behind the scenes with their popcorn, watching all of your flaws, the chinks in your armor, and they're taking notes and preparing. So remember, these Iranians been preparing for more than 20 years for this war. So they more than ready. They dug in, and they're not giving up. They're not looking for any negotiations. Every time they try to negotiate, you know, we're ready to, over here to negotiate. You already giving up your shit. You know, you keep fucking them up. They like, nah, we're cool. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say, Shalom.